Hey, folks, welcome back to the show. Today's episode is a solo, and it's going to be short and sweet and to the point, I hope. I'm going to be talking about mitochondria and why. Because of all the organelles in our body, even though we can't see our mitochondria, we can't technically feel them, although I would argue you can, because if you're low in energy, at a cellular level, if you've got that bone tired feeling, sometimes it's mitochondria just not being able to keep up with the demands for a number of reasons. And so without mitochondria, I mean, never mind, there's no longevity, there's no life, right? I think the estimation is we would last less than 2 minutes without, if all the mitochondria in our body spontaneously kind of up and died. So many of you know, I would think most of you probably know, that your mitochondria are organelles that exist inside your cells. And it's not like there's one mitochondria per cell here. We're talking thousands in some cases. Depending on the tissue, there's thousands of mitochondria in each cell. And their job is to produce ATP, which is the energy currency of your body. So if I was going to do an episode on something that you can't see, that's teeny tiny, that exists in your body, I think starting with mitochondria is a really good place. So let's talk about what we need to protect our mitochondria from. So I'm not going to go into huge detail, probably not going to go into that much detail on any of these 10, some more than others maybe, but bottom line, at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to protect our mitochondria from oxidative stress, right? So mitochondria are like, imagine they're like little engines and they're making all this energy, but there's always, whenever you're making something, there's going to be waste products. And one of those waste products are reactive oxygen species, which create oxidative stress. So this is why some of these supplements are going to be important. I mean, we're going to talk about supplements, but we're also going to talk about lifestyle stuff. So there's going to be lots of free things you can apply, just to be clear. But anyway, when we talk about supplements, or frankly, even when we talk about the nutrients that we can get from food, from healthy whole foods, then these are the guys that come in. This is the cleanup crew. They mop up the excess reactive oxygen species. Now, you don't want to get rid of all of them because there's that thing called hormetic stress, right? So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger kind of thing. So just enough stress to cause adaptation, but not so much to overwhelm the system. So regardless, we want to protect them from oxidation. The next thing is we want to promote mitochondrial biogenesis. What does that mean? We want to incite the body. We want to give the body the signal that we need more mitochondria so that the body will continue to produce mitochondria. As we age, the number of mitochondria in our tissue starts to go down. And frankly, that's aging, right? So things don't work as well. Things don't repair as well. Our muscles aren't as strong, whatever the case may be. But the less mitochondria we have, the less energy we have. And that is essentially at the root of one of the big roots of aging. And next is we want to promote mitochondrial repair. So your body's a miser, and we want that, right? Your body's going to look at something, not exactly, but basically the process in the body is to consider whether it's a cell or in this case a mitochondria, is it worth fixing? Can it be repaired? And if it can be repaired, it will repair it. Does the same thing with DNA, right? Can it be fixed? If it can be fixed, amazing. If it can't be fixed, it's got to get turfed. Otherwise, it's going to make problems. So we want to do things, again, that give your body that indication that there's enough stress that it needs to take care of the house. And in taking care of the house, we got to look at what's in the house. Can we fix it? If we can't fix it, let's pitch it. If we need to make more, we'll make more. And finally, if we can't, and if we can't repair it, the way we pitch it in the body is through a process called mitophagy. Now, you've all heard of autophagy, right? Now, mitophagy is exactly like autophagy. It's self-eating. It's like when the cell self-destructs and self-eats. But in this case, it's specific to mitochondria. So it's important that damaged mitochondria get either repaired or get gotten rid of. Okay? All right. So let's jump into our 10 strategies for aging well by supporting proper mitochondria or great mitochondria. And the first one is so free. Okay. Like I'm not going to be sitting here sending you out shopping for a bunch of stuff. I mean, you can always go out and buy stuff. Obviously, there's always cool gadgets to buy. But bottom line, one of the most powerful ways to support your mitochondria is through caloric restriction. I can hear the groans now. Seriously, you're going to tell me to eat less again? Yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. Like, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about the studies where they studied monkeys and they showed that the monkeys that were fed, I think it was 25% or maybe 30% fewer calories than their buddies who got to eat as much as they wanted, or even maybe ate an appropriate amount of food. Those guys, while they may have been hungry and not as happy as the other guys, they lived longer. And why? Because ultimately, that caloric restriction, it exerts a little bit of a stressor on the body, and it forces the body to say, what do we need to clean up? What do we need? We need more energy. We need more mitochondria. And so it kind of keeps the body in this constant sort of appropriate house cleaning mode. Now, fasting falls into this as well, but the caveat here is, of course, we don't want to fast too much, right? So fasting is in and of itself its own topic. And what I see is people tend to be at one or two extremes. Either they fast too much because they've kind of gotten the hang of it. It's super convenient and they just love not having to cook, not having to eat. It just makes life easy. But the problem is when you go too far into the world of fasting, you're sacrificing sometimes your lean mass, like your muscles, and it can actually even compromise in an extreme, it can compromise your immune system. But done well, fasting can really get your body kind of optimal, right? Like the right amount of fasting and probably if you look at it over the course of a week, if at the end of the week, even if you had a couple of feast days, if you had enough days where you were hypocaloric, where you had less food and you end up kind of coming at that 25 to 30% less, fewer calories than your burn rate, then most likely that is being in a good place. And that is going to support healthy mitochondria quite apart from any other of the benefits you're going to get there. Okay, next, this is also relatively free, right, for most of us, and that's exercise. And I'm not talking, unfortunately, in this case, for mitochondria, the best exercise is not necessarily your stroll around the block or your long leisurely walks. Not that those aren't good. They have their benefits. But in the case of mitochondria, what we want to be doing is kind of like Tabatas or sprints or HIIT. I once watched a talk that Dr. Rhonda Patrick did, and she was talking about, these, and I do these as well, these exercise snacks. But the exercise snack that you would be, and I'm not sure if she called them a snack or not, but maybe she did. But basically what you want to do is you want to really push yourself for even 1 or 2 minutes a few times a day. Right? So you want to get out of your chair and maybe do 1 to 2 minutes of jumping jacks, or 1 to 2 minutes of high knees, or 1 to 2 minutes of, dare I say it, burpees. If you happen to be like me and you have a 20 or 30 pound kettlebell in your office, you might do 1 to 2 minutes of kettlebell swings. So doing those really kind of hard hitting, push your body hard for a short period of time is going to be amazing for your mitochondria, in addition to lots of other things, right? It's also really good for your brain to do that during your workday because it kind of wakes you up, gets you out of your kind of sitting in your desk, maybe stupor every once in a while. You might need that kind of reboot. Now, it doesn't have to be little 1 to 2 minutes. We can be talking about, like I said before, Tabata workouts, right? Which is your 4-minute sets of 4 different exercises. You can get those done in 16 to 20 minutes, depending on how long you do it. You could do a HIIT workout where you're going really hard and then pulling back, really hard, pulling back. And then, of course, if you're inclined to go shopping, you don't need to, right? So all these things are free. You can run up a hill and walk down. That's a perfect sprint. You could do all of the different things I was just talking about. Or if you're very short on time, but I would suggest that you might want to do a couple of these in a day if you're really looking to help your mitochondria. Something like the Carol bike is built for this, right? This is a tool that is going to push you through like 2 20-second sprints. and yet it's pushing you to over your max. This is the type of thing that is glycogen depleting. It's also really good for mitochondria. So I'm not saying you have to go out and buy a Carol bike. It's just kind of top of mind because I happen to have one, but there's all those other ways to support mitochondria through exercise. All right. Next, another freebie is sleep. What do you mean sleep? I mean, yeah, okay, sleep. How could my sleep possibly support my mitochondria? Well, particularly for mitochondria in the brain, when you're sleeping, you guys have heard about the glymphatic system. So that's the system in your brain that allows to detoxify the toxins and all those reactive oxygen species from all the work from all the day. Well, your brain will only do that when you're getting into certain phases of sleep. And so in order to cycle through those phases of sleep, and ideally we go through 4 or 5 of those cycles a night, you need enough time. So generally somewhere between 6.5 to 7.5, 8 hours of sleep a night. And that varies person to person. And you need quality sleep. So it's not just closing your eyes and lying on your back. You actually need to go to sleep. So that's a very, very important piece of mitochondrial health in a very, very important organ called your brain. And, it's no surprise that the brain, the heart, the muscles, these are the tissues in the body that have the most density of mitochondria. So they are the most energy. They need the most energy, so they need to use up a lot of energy. So sleep is a massive piece of the puzzle here. I said best physical exercise twice on my list. I am using a list so that I don't forget anything. Okay. Chronic stress is a killer for mitochondria. It's a killer for everything else, frankly. So here's more free tools for you. Breath work, meditation. I had something else written here. No, breath work and meditation. These are, again, this is going to allow you to teach your body how to regulate your nervous system, right? Balancing the sympathetic and parasympathetic arms of the nervous system is ultimately going to allow that reduction in cortisol. It's going to allow things to settle down so that your body can function properly at a cellular level. So definitely managing your stress is going to be a really important piece of the puzzle when it comes to supporting mitochondria. All right, next, our temperature. Remember, we mentioned hormetic stressors at the beginning of the podcast. Well, what's a hormetic stressor? Temperature variation. Something like sauna, if you happen to have access to sauna, is a great way to support your mitochondria. All right. Those heat shock proteins, like getting into that extreme heat, giving the body that signal that it's under duress, and then removing the stressor is going to be a massive help to mitochondria. And at the same time, we have cold exposure, deliberate cold exposure. So deliberate cold exposure, whether it's in a cold plunge, so whether you're doing a cold shower first thing in the morning and then alternating it with hot. Now, I don't suggest that you scald yourself. So sauna's for sauna. For the extreme heat, I would say you're going to kind of need to get yourself to a sauna. For the cold exposure, you could do that yourself at home, right? People get really into it. People who love this stuff, they'll fill their tub with cold tap water, and they'll maybe have a couple of bags of ice in their freezer, and they'll dump the ice into the water. And there you go. You have a cold plunge right there for you. Didn't have to go out and spend a dime. But that cold exposure, again, is going to be hugely beneficial for your mitochondria. And you probably only need to stay in there for, like 1 to 2 minutes. 2 minutes, probably. I mean, my friend Kristen Weitzel, she's the ice queen, I call her. She's the expert when it comes to cold exposure. But basically, if you can stay in there for a couple of minutes, and you can start with short bursts of cold from your shower. But if you can stay in that cold plunge for a couple of minutes, that's going to be massively helpful to your mitochondria. It's also going to be really helpful to mitochondria in brown fat. Now, brown fat is the type of fat that actually you want. And the reason it's brown is because it's filled with mitochondria. So your white adipose tissue, white fat, it even looks different. It's these big white droplets, like goblets, if you will, gobs of fat, and they have maybe a couple of mitochondria in them. They don't have a lot. Brown fat is multiple smaller gobs of fat, and they're loaded with mitochondria, and they get way more blood supply because, of course, they need more energy because they're consuming energy. And the way they actually access nutrients and they expend that energy as heat. So brown fat is actually one of the ways that babies and young children who have quite a lot of brown fat, because they don't have other ways to thermogenically, especially newborns, they can't really regulate their body temperature that well yet. So their brown fat is part of the mechanism of how they do it. And if you look at Scandinavian countries and other cold countries, one of the things that they do is they bundle up their babies in the winter, and they might put them on the porch. I have friends who grew up like this. They were bundled up as little babies, and when they went for their nap, they were put in a stroller on the porch, all bundled up against the cold. But this is in part how I'm sure that's not why anybody's great grandmother was doing this for brown fat, but they knew that the babies, was really beneficial for babies. And it turns out that it's beneficial for your brown fat. So when we're doing our deliberate cold exposure, one of the things we're trying to do, aside from becoming mentally more fit and all those things, is we are trying to rebuild our brown fat stores. And where those brown, and really, like adults, less than 300 grams of brown fat in your body, folks. It's not a lot. And it's kind of under the clavicle. It's behind like the upper shoulders, and it's down along the spine, and it might be around the kidneys and around the heart. Like, it's in a very specific areas. It's really hard to get to. And I think that that's part of the reason why it's really the cold plunge that's going to get you to activate that brown fat, because that's the only thing that's really going to get deep enough into your system. But suffice to say, any type of cold exposure, you may need to build up. If this is something you want to try, you may need to start with very short cold exposure. A lot of people will start with the shower, and they'll build themselves up to the point where they can actually get into a tub and sit there for a minute or two. And I would say that once you're getting into the world of getting into a tub, you might want to, check out Kristen Weitzel's material, because she gives a lot of material online about this. She trains coaches. Unless you live in a place in like Toronto, like I do, and we have a place here called, the name is, I want to call it Outpost, but it's not. It's downtown. And they, it'll come back to me before the end of the podcast. I know it will. But they have a whole room filled with cold plunge tubs, and they have a sauna in there. But you're putting out some cash to go there. So if you want to keep it simple, just do it in your own bathroom. All right. Next, sunlight. Now, not artificial light. Artificial light, we know, is not our friend. However, sunlight in moderate exposures, don't freak out at me. I'm not telling you to go out sunbathing for 20 hours a day or anything, but sunlight helps your body to make vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 happens to be very beneficial to mitochondria. So getting into sunlight, even, in the morning before 10 a.m. for a little while, exposing yourself to sun will be beneficial. And of course, red light and near infrared light. So red light and near infrared light, you can get it from nature at sunrise and at sunset. A lot of people talk about seeing the sun at sunrise and sunset being extremely good, first of all, for circadian rhythm. So my good friend Molly Eastman talks about this a lot. And as a matter of fact, also that's maintaining that circadian rhythm also happens to be really crucial for blood sugar control. And I have another friend called Danielle Hamilton, who talks a lot about circadian rhythm and glucose control. But in addition, that red light and near infrared light, that spectrum of light that you get at the beginning and the end of the day, is extremely beneficial for your mitochondria. It virtually it's through this whole photon business, it actually feeds the electron transport chain and ramps up the mitochondria. That's the freebie. The not so freebie is, of course, getting access to a red and near infrared light panel. Now you can combine that into your sauna. You can get a sauna that's an infrared sauna, or you can get a panel. I really like, you guys probably know, I really like it. They're on my Nat Recommends page, actually. So for healing injuries and stuff, I really like the Flex Beam. I like the Move Plus by Kineon for it's a bit more targeted. It's a bit more like lasers, whereas the Flex Beam is like this really portable, thing that'll almost like a tiny panel, but it'll wrap around your joints when you have an injury. And then, of course, I really like the light path LED panels. They're built really well. And Scott makes them not only with the exact right spectrum of bandwidths of red and near infrared light, but he also has built in pulsing that you can set at different frequencies. And that too will help with mitochondria. Okay. Actually, another thing before I even get to nutrients and supplements, another thing that really supports mitochondria. I can't believe I didn't write this down on my list. Good Lord. And that would be PMF, like pulsed electromagnetic frequency devices. Extremely beneficial for mitochondria because now you're helping the energy gradient across the cell membrane, and that is going to upregulate the function of the cell, the movement of toxins out and nutrients in, and anything you do at a cellular level, of course, is going to help the mitochondria. All right. So from a things you can take perspective, because I know there are people who really always want to kind of know what can I take? What are the things that are going to support my mitochondria? So the main drivers here are going to be things like CoQ10, which is a major antioxidant. We mentioned vitamin D3 earlier. Getting your D3 made by Mother Nature through sunlight exposure, obviously appropriate sunlight exposure, is going to be optimal, but supplementing with a good D3 with K2. Now the K2 has nothing to do with your mitochondria, has everything to do with your bone health. But D3, if you're going to take D3, you must take it with K2. But vitamin D3 is going to be important for mitochondrial function. CoQ10, super important. As a matter of fact, the heart is loaded with CoQ10. PQQ is a supplement that you'll often find. It's a nutrient you'll find. A lot of supplements will combine CoQ10 and PQQ. Again, extremely important for mitochondria. Urolithin A. You've heard me talk about this a lot. This is the supplement that the only ingredient in MitoPure by Timeline Nutrition. They've got some great studies on urolithin A and supporting mitochondrial function, which ultimately supports physical function. But in their more recent studies, they've actually shown that urolithin A, because it supports mitophagy, so this is the turnover mitochondria. Remember, we said at the beginning, we want to get rid of the broken and the ones that can't be repurposed. And that, because by getting rid of the broken is how we stimulate the body to make new mitochondria. So urolithin A is critical for that. And what I was going to say is the studies that Timeline Nutrition has done and is doing not only is showing benefits for athletic performance, but also for brain, for cognitive health, even in the face of neurodegenerative diseases, as well as heart health, immune function. Like it, again, I mean, you can imagine, because mitochondria are so critical to everything, it's going to touch every aspect, right? Creatine is another one. Creatine is really interesting. Creatine is one of those supplements that everybody thinks is really important for exercise, and it is. But it turns out that creatine is super important for the brain. It's super important for muscles. It's recently, not too long ago, in my BSP community, my membership community, we did a brain reset with a doctor, and he had tested everybody beforehand, and then he tested them afterwards. And this was the prodrome test. This was Dr. Dan Goodenow. And although many people did need plasmalogens, not everybody did, but everybody, virtually everyone that he consulted with was told that they needed creatine. I can't think of a single person. I don't think there was one person that he didn't say, and creatine. So creatine, some people find it's a little hard on their stomach. So start low. It's a powder. I put it in my coffee or in my shakes every day. So you can start at 1 or 2 milligrams a day. It's just a scoop. It's like a little, no, actually, I think it's grams. I want to get my units right here. It's grams, actually. So you can start at 1 to 2 grams. The full dose that you're going to work up towards is a teaspoon or 5 grams. Okay. And then alpha lipoic acid is another really important, very important compound for mitochondria. Then we have L-carnitine, and another one, which is maybe a little less conventional, is methylene blue. Now, methylene blue, super interesting compound. I have a podcast that I did with Dr. Scott Scher. It's got to be 2 years ago now, around November, December. I'm going to say we're 2024, 2020. I would look at 2022 if you're interested. Or if you go to the Nat Recommends page to the supplements, you'll find the prescription supplements, and that number of the podcast is going to be right there. Had a huge conversation with Dr. Scher about the benefits of methylene blue. The only thing with methylene, and the methylene blue is fantastic for mitochondria. And there are people like Dr. John Laurent who will actually stack methylene blue with red light exposure. Sorry, not blue light, red and near infrared light exposure. So for example, I'll take methylene blue and about 10, 20 minutes later, I'll go sit in front of my red light. Or he makes these really cool methylene blue eye drops, and I'll use those before going outside in the sun, or even sometimes in the morning before I sit in front of my red light to get my red light exposure first thing in the morning. So methylene blue is really interesting. Just a word of caution, you don't want to overdo it, right? So it's one of those nutrients, and it's going to depend on your circumstances. I'm not going to give you dosages here, but I will say that I used, because I was dealing with a chronic, I was actually dealing with chronic UTIs for quite a long time. And I finally kicked them by using methylene blue. And it didn't have anything to do with my mitochondria particularly. It had to do with the fact that methylene blue was one of the first antimicrobials that was ever used. And it was really quite something. And I think I used maybe 15 drops of the 15 to 20 drops a day in water. Be careful around anything white. This stuff stains like nobody's business, but I'm told that citric acid will get the stains out of just about anything. So that's methylene blue, but methylene blue also very, very, very good for mitochondria, and you can stack it with your red and near infrared light therapy. Finally, supporting NAD. So the B vitamins are going to be very important, because those B vitamins that support mitochondria, particularly B3, like niacin, niacinamide, the NR, NMN, all of which aren't B vitamins, but the precursors to NAD. And there's definitely some really great supplements out there now. As you guys probably know, I'm a huge fan of Qualia's NAD Plus, because they've got all 3 precursors in there, and they've got a very comprehensive stack of other nutrients that also support NAD production, of which some of the B vitamins are very important in there as well. Yeah, so that's that. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else that popped into my head while I was talking here. But, famous last words. I said that this was going to be short and sweet. We're 27, almost 28 minutes in. So this has been a half hour. Hopefully you got a couple of good ideas out of here. I hope so. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's other little systems in the body you'd like me to do a deep dive, like me to do. And I wouldn't call this necessarily a deep dive, but if you want me to do one of these short episodes, kind of overview episodes on ways to support, and I happily do it. But for now, we're going to leave it at this. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I appreciate you guys. Make sure that you sign up for my newsletter on natnidham.com. And if you got value from this episode, make sure that you share it with your friends and your family or your network, whoever you think will also get value. And last but not least, if you're feeling inspired today, please make sure to leave us a review on whatever platform you are currently listening to the podcast on. So whether it's Spotify or Apple, those reviews really, really, really help us out. So thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to the next time that we will connect. Even though I don't see you, we connect. All right. Bye-bye.